Well, it affects me very much because I have a strong Bangladeshi sense of identity. I obviously have an Indian sense of identity, which is my country of citizenship. But Bangladesh is where I grew up, and as you rightly say, I spent a lot of time there and began my school education there in St. Gregory's School in Dhaka. No, and I used to go to a home in Maniganj, and in my maternal side to Vikrampur, Sonarong and so on, and Maniganj Motto. So these are all very loving territories for me. I am worried, like many people are, as to how Bangladesh will stabilize out of the problems it has got into. Now, before saying that, one has to mention that Bangladesh made some major improvement over the years. It began with much lower per capita income than India, and then overcame that barrier and went above it. It had a much higher birth rate, fertility rate than India, but it was able to cut it down much more sharply. And life expectancy, one of the major indicators, also became higher in Bangladesh than in India. So I think there were achievements when we criticize things that happen, and undoubtedly there were problems to complain about governance as well as about um, freedom of various kinds. Now, the papers were relatively free. I think newspapers like Daily Star in English, or Pusawala in Bengali, and many other papers did flourish, often taking anti-government lines. So it wasn't a tyranny in the sense some tyrannies are, which is to make opposition voices mute. This never happened in Bangladesh, which is why the student movement could become strong. But the student movement was connected with a relatively small issue about selection for employment and their treatment. And I think, unfortunately, the government was too uh, centered on other questions and did not make the many concessions, which it did ultimately, but didn't make it in time, which would have made all these problems relatively remote. But as it emerges, there were other issues of people being imprisoned and people having difficulty in leading a free life in Bangladesh. So there was a bit of a picture. And just as earlier we only heard about the successes, now we are hearing only about the failures. We have to take a broader view. And as I see myself also as a Bangladeshi, and not just as an Indian, but even as that, I would like a broader assessment of, of what happened. That is the most important thing in Bangladesh now. I think among the successes um, uh, of the earlier regime, there are major economic, social changes, gender advancement of women, and so on. But among the failures is not being quite even-handed in encouraging people to present the oppositional point of view. The newspapers were technically free, but the encouragement was certainly there to praise the government. Now, the same issue of balance comes up now. Yunus was a very old friend. I know is a very able, in many ways, great human person. He's trying to do his best, and he did a number of good statements about Bangladesh being a secular country and having democratic commitment. But it's not easy if you're governing the country alone. So we have to have a picture where the different points of view are represented. And if there's something to learn from the previous Army League regime, is that despite their many successes, they were not successful in constructing a pluralist platform for everyone. And that mistake the present government, advised by Yunus, should not have. Bangladesh has one great advantage. The Bangladeshi army has shown great restraint in the past, even the last time when they had to stop civil politics. They didn't continue to rule the country as many military do. So given that favorable factor, given the tendency of the Bengalis to hear different point of view, whether it's Rabindranath or Kazi Nazrul Islam or any of the major poets in Bengal, either side of Bengal, there is a general interest in hearing different sides. That affects even the army. And I think Bangladesh should try to make best use of it and not try to drive any group out. So I would say the breaking of the monopoly of Army League to the extent that was needed would have been understandable. But banning the Army League from expressing its point of view was to commit the same kind of mistake about which the other parties complained when the Army League was in power. So I think we have to take a broader view, hope that the Bengali concern with freedom, with plural platform would continue, and I hope the elections will be more visibly free than many people claim they have been. So there are things that can change. You know, after all, there was an attempt to split Bengal in the early years of the last century, and that didn't work. In fact, the hope of the British government was by creating a strong Muslim majority area, they would make the Hindu-Muslim divide stronger, which was favorable to the empire. That didn't happen. The leadership in Bangladesh and in East Pakistan also remained, despite the agony of the riot, remained largely non-communal, and secularism was something which got celebrated by Hindus and Muslims, and to the extent there exists a small community of other religions like Buddhism and Christians and so on. So I am worried about Bangladesh. I'm not hopeless about it. And I think the remedy lies remembering the virtues that Bengalis have always admired: plurality, freedom, non-religious discrimination, and that is non-discrimination on religious lines. Now, there have been decline of that in India too, and I think it worries me greatly. But Bangladesh, to a great extent, is in a favorable position in the sense that decline has been less sharp even in West Bengal in India, and Bangladesh has similarity despite being one being Hindu majority, other being Muslim majority, in wanting Cardinal Wu's Islam, Cardinal Wu's tolerant. I didn't mean Cardinal Wu's Islam. He wasn't particularly religious at all. But also the magazine with which he was associated carried in his masthead the old line, Sawal upore manuscripto, Tahar upore nai. And that message is as important today in Bangladesh as it is in India, as it has ever been. But it's very difficult to tell, if you suddenly become the head of a country, which effectively Yunus is, uh, and you have to worry about different factions. The present, when I say Trabajo por el Manuscrito, may have been Cardinal Wu's message, but there's also Islamic parties, and now rather strongly separated Hindu parties too in Bangladesh. You will hear about agitations going on that. This is very sad, and Yunus is dealing with this problem. Had he been able to solve these problems, well, it's not easy to solve them, and there's a long way to go. On the other hand, as an old friend of Yunus, I've great belief in his ability to talk as well as ability to listen. And the listening has to be to voices from old Bengal, which made Bangladesh possible, West Bengal being different from a lot of India possible. And whether you go by electoral record or whether you go by the ease with which opposition point of views could be stated, I think in the direction of tolerance and freedom. And I think Yunus need not be told about this because he has been a champion of them. Now, was Yunus treated rather badly by the last regime? I believe so. I've said so in Bengali papers. But on the other hand, that's not a reason for not being even-handed today when he is in charge of a great country. But there have been attacks on mosques in India. I think these things, to the extent it's happening, should be stopped, certainly. There's no question. But this is a big danger that there's nothing as easy as breeding communalism based on playing up some incident. You were not born yet, but I was a young man, a student, when the riots took place. Muslim papers, including Ittifaq and so on, were playing up the Hindu barbarities on Muslim isolated spots. And even Jugantar and Andoraja were playing up the opposite. This is a good question to ask because Bangladesh could take pride in treatment of minorities and keeping the communalist forces like Jamaat in check. To some extent, even moderating Jamaat, but also allowing that not to dominate the politics of of Bangladesh. Now, it's very easy to shift from that and focusing on alternative stories about minorities in different parts of the world. You can construct a communal uh, victory. I remember as a young man, as a student in the 1940s, that's what happened. The papers like uh, papers with interest in Muslim separatism, like Ittifaq and so on, which may be a good paper now, but at that time did say up Hindu barbarities against Muslims, and Jugantaranda Wajah said up Muslim barbarities against Hindus. Now, very easy, tit for tat, to build a story where each side bombards the other. The fact is, Bangladesh, if it has these minority Hindu establishment badly attacked, that has to be stopped. And this is job of the government, and to some extent, job of the population. And I noticed that the major papers, Daily Star, Futamala, and so on, they remain strongly anti-communal and secular. And they were in Dhaka Tribune. They could play a part. The government can play a part. Similarly, on the other side, the tendency to play up the vandalizing of mosques in India has to be borne in mind. When people cry of vandalization of temples and never heard of Bobby Murphy, never heard of the leader of a major party on the roof of a mosque breaking it up on some kavya. I think of Ramayana as a kavya rather than the scripture. That in that kavya that this was the birthplace of Ram. Now, as Rabindranath Thakur said, that a confusion between a kavya and scripture is a fatal confusion, and that has to be solved. What is the biggest minority establishment that was broken in the subcontinent? The answer is Babi Masjid. It's not a Hindu temple in Bangladesh. Now, even just to play up Babi Masjid would be a mistake, but certainly just playing up the Hindu temples being vandalized by some Muslim Janata could be similarly a kind of bombshell that makes people's blood boil, generates communal anger, and most importantly, divisionism between Hindus and Muslims. India has always, India undivided, including what is now Bangladesh, has tried against that. Whether we think of Kobe, Dadu, Mirabai, or the Bahus of Bengal, they have tried to build bridges. And that's what we need even today, both on the Indian side as well as on the Bangladeshi side. And just to talk about Hindu Mandir being dishonored and having never heard about Babi Masjid is not a very good journalistic enterprise. And it could be very dangerous too.